Good morning, everybody. All right. Happy Wednesday, the day of the National Weather Alert System. Going off today at 2:20 Eastern Standard Time. And of course, all other respective time zones. And, well, you know, I think the frequency that we're all so afraid of went off, but the beep might actually trigger some people into some kind of psychosis. I don't know what kind of psychosis. We already see the psychosomatic syndromes out there on top of health issues. So that's already going to be interesting to see and watch. But yeah, the last few days, and it's going to be even hotter today. So I'm going to feel some stuff this afternoon. Right now, things are relatively okay. I was up early. But this last couple weeks has been an aggressively slow boil. And luckily it's been slow, relatively slow, but other people it's probably too fast for them and they couldn't handle it. But I was able to handle and keep up with the level of energy because I knew that food was the answer and release was the answer. And so my husband was home sick. He says he still feels a little bit, but I can't tell with him. I could barely tell when he's drunk, when he's, drunk off of beer, when we're out partying. Not that I go out partying at all, but when I'm with him and he does party, I can barely tell. I mean, he might be a little bit happier, but you can't really tell with him what's going on unless he says it. But for him to go to work today instead of sleeping today, okay, all day. He did sleep in a lot yesterday, and then I fed him. But for him to go to work, I mean, he could have taken the week off, and we could afford it. It'd be tight, but we could afford it. But he's out there. He's doing whatever he's doing. But he felt bad when he came home. When he came home and then he did the mowing on Sunday and felt bad. And so he stayed home Monday. And it was probably when those frequencies were pretty aggressive, and they will be again today. Again, right now, it's the calm before the storm of this afternoon because it's going to be over 80 degrees today. And so I can tell when something's going to happen because I'll hear the tone in my ear and then I'll feel the stuff later on. And so, so Tuesday, yep, I feel the frequencies. Okay. I had heart palpitations yesterday and I had hunger and I was eating so much. So then I said, now a bagel and peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I feel a bit edgy because I made the same protein breakfast. It was like a hamburger with cheese and egg, with egg and potatoes and flour and onion. And so that was so good. And I definitely fed that to my husband because he needed it. He needs the protein when he gets sick because he needs that energy. Because what happens is you have microbial babies, you have offspring, and those offspring need to be protein loaded. And so that's why it's so important during these energy conversions that you eat a big steak or something very rich in protein, animal proteins, not vegetable proteins. You don't want to turn into a vegetable, but you need the animal proteins. And then you also need to release those demons every morning because as the body turns over and converts from the old world to the new world at the micro level, right now at the macro level, we're going from the old world to the new world and everyone's resisting. But at the micro level, you have to go from the old world to the new world in order to survive this, or you're going to have so much diversity in your body that it'll be in conflict, like having 7 generations of humans in your body all fighting with each other about ideologies. And you don't want to have that much conflict in the body. That's why those who have cancer, disease, and chronic illness are suffering astronomically because they are trying to resist the new world as they keep holding on to the old world, and you can't do that in a new environment. And that's why there's so much suffering, because of the conflict. Okay, so then we have this whole frequency, well, this whole thing about today's weather alert, and everyone's afraid of the frequencies. And yeah, you should be, because we've been dealing with some crazy ass frequencies. Will what's going on the last 3 years be so much more at 2:20 Eastern Standard Time for a half hour? Well, I would say a minute-long beep could trigger some people into some kind of reaction. Any kind of reaction. It could be physical reaction because they've built up so much suspense, or psychological reaction that will lead to physical reaction, or who knows. Okay, but I could tell you that any kind of beep that's going for a minute will trigger something. And then the frequencies already turned up the last few weeks. Remember when I started out when my eye was looking like it was bloodshot? And we heard about Burning Man. And we're talking about Burning Man. And then being held there for a certain amount of time because the rains kept everybody there. And then we hear about the Marburg virus. And everyone's afraid of the V's. I mean, the campaigns of fear, which I understand, it's all psychological. And it is physical too, because those all work together, has been like back to back to back to back to back. And then all the storms and the hurricane and the flooding in New York. And now Nepal went through two hurricanes, 2 earthquakes, 4.6 and 6.2. The 4.6 was a precursor, then a half hour later, it was a 6.2. If you felt the 4.6, then you should have got out of that place and been somewhere. But how do people know this? They don't know this. Hindsight's 2020. But it seems like these earthquakes are coming in pairs. They're coming in twos, giving you a warning. And then if you stay in your house or whatever, then there's a bigger one coming up right after that. And so those who live in earthquake-prone areas, maybe that's a sign that says that if there's like one earthquake, get out of your house. Don't stay in it, because there might be another one following up. It could be even more devastating. Okay? Not to say that's going to be uniform, but I'll tell you, man, all these firsts that are going on right now, it's a little unsettling. That's why the whole J world is about strategizing. No matter what, when things happen, you strategize. And when you strategize for one thing, like the hurricanes and moving from the coast, which I still suggest you do, you still have to strategize then the frequencies and strategize people going off the deep end and strategizing so many things. I wouldn't even pay attention to politics. I'm not even concerned with the politics, because that's actually all irrelevant in my world. It doesn't matter who the Speaker of the House is or not. It doesn't matter who's president or not when you think about it. Because even if Trump becomes president for whatever fluke reason, he's not going to be able to stop what's already coming and what's already here. He can't fight weather. He doesn't have that kind of power. And they won't let him have that kind of power. Okay? I mean, maybe they will. Who the hell knows? But I would say that at this point, there is a new world order, and Trump doesn't have that kind of access to really stop what's going on. He doesn't. Or we wouldn't be dealing with it. It would already be done with. But so you never know who the players are, who's really on the inside, who's on the outside, who's playing a part. You don't know anything. All you know is you have to save yourself. And right now, my head's on a swivel. All your heads need to be on a swivel. You can't be too entrenched in one area or another. You really have to be able to juggle all the different fronts that are going on. Okay? And so for all we know, the frequency is already here. And October 4th and 11th is just a confirmation. And those beeps, if it happens on the 4th or the 11th, that one beep and then a 1.5 hour long message, which is still a frequency. Because in order for that message to be sent out, my phone, every time this last couple of days, holding onto my phone in the afternoon, it hurt. So I know frequencies are coming out of that phone. And I'm fine with it. I have to adapt to it. I use my phone for everything, That's the thing. The system has gotten us conditioned to rely on our phone. And I think it's a good thing, because no matter what, you're going to have to deal with electronic magnetic frequencies, EMF. You're going to have to, because I have 300 something and 99 antennas and 357 cell towers within the vicinity of my area. That's a lot of cell towers. You can't get away from any EMF. I mean, you can wear your tinfoil hats, but how far is that going to get you? You're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to eat to the level of this environment. And so again, for all we know, the frequency is already here, and October 4th and 11th is just a confirmation, and the frequency could get progressively stronger. Slow boil or fast. And ever since I had my eye issue and then having to eat for the environment and release those hives, I had all those hives the last couple of weeks, a lot of hives. I had to blow my nose. I had fatigue. My husband felt congested yesterday. He had a headache, and he didn't treat any of his symptoms. Though he said he wanted to go get some NyQuil. I asked him when he went to go get cigarettes, because he still smokes, did you get any NyQuil? He said no, thank gosh. Now, could I attribute the less reaction this September to last September is because he didn't treat the disease? Maybe it's just a lesser frequency that wasn't as aggressive. But not treating the disease like people did might also save your butt, because when you treat disease, you develop offspring. Those offspring get activated. And when those offspring get activated, they could do a number of issues to your body. What are offspring from? From the antibiotics, from all the remedies, from the surgeries. Because when you alter your genes and you damage your genes from the surgeries, there is now damaged offspring that replicate. And they become altered and handicapped. All right? And so we won't know until we know, right? And will we know what we know, or will it be more of the same? And so somebody posted a comment in one of the Diet Suddenly groups. I would like to know why they're telling you when stuff like this goes on and don't tell you, like on the TV or radio, they say it's a test and they don't give us a warning. The only time you see these clowns is when something already happened. Yeah. Yeah, they're letting everybody know the frequency already went out. Not that it's gonna come out. It already went out. I felt the last couple of weeks. Animals are reacting. Animals are dying. People who are already on hanging by a string, they're dead. They're gone. People who are hanging by a string are slowly, the string is becoming shorter and shorter and shorter as they keep treating their disease and worried about fucking politics, which is not going to freaking help them. And so what I figured out yesterday was that with these frequency shifts, you must eat, not only for the environment to keep up with the level of energy, but you also have to release the old world, the old damaged cells. And every frequency, you have to keep going through the levels. You can't keep damaging cells anymore. But what do people do when they feel a pain? They either smoke some more pot, create more offspring to feed. I've seen people who I haven't seen in a while, I saw their profile pics, and they are a self-proclaimed cannabis smoker, and they're not afraid to post that on their Facebook. So they smoke cannabis, and then those cannabis, that drug, develops offspring. And they were relatively a big person. But in this environment, when those offspring, when they get activated, they eat. What do they eat? Not only the food that you're feeding it, but also you, the infrastructure. So now this person looks so skinny, looks so elderly. And I know why. Because I know the person's probably still eating food, but that food is not going to her parents' cells. It's going towards the babies who are not only eating the food, but also eating her. And she's aging progressively. That's what cannabis does. That's what all the drugs do, and the herbs and the extracts and the detoxes and all the different remedies. They develop offspring, and it ages a person exponentially, because those babies are no different than your children at home, wanting money from you, wanting you to buy groceries all the time, wanting everything from you, basically start cannibalizing you. And so that's exactly what these little offspring in your body, these microbial offspring, they act like entitled children, and they eat everything. They are the out of control vampires Twilight was talking about, and the Vampire Diaries, and all the vampire movies that have series. They're trying to tell you it's the offspring, it's the children that are destroying the parents inside the body. That's why you die, as well as in families. The children destroy the parents, and the parents allow it because that's what they were encultured to do. That's what they were trained to do, was allow their children to cannibalize them and then embrace it and honor it. And then also listen to the parents. So that way, when that child becomes a parent, they'll do the same thing as what their parents did. Allow the children to run roughshod on them, cannibalize them, give their kids everything they want, and then take all the treatments and all the different drugs. And so then the parent dies at some point. And so you can't keep damaging cells anymore if you want to live. Release the old, take on the new. That's why food is so important. Food is your fuel. You convert that food into you, rebuilding you. Why do you think people die? They damage themselves systematically and they are starving. The last 3 years, I caught up releasing the old world and taking on so much of the new. Though, when I do make dinner or breakfast or lunch or something for my husband when I'm cooking, I'll listen to the 1960s music. I'll listen to the old world because it's comforting listening to my mom's music. I listen to the Charles Manson song that's so just haunting and so calming. And then after that, it's like I have a mix like of Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan and John Denver and all these old folk singers, the 1960s, 1970s. And so I have a bit of the past in me as well as the future, as well as the present. And so release the old, take on the new. That's why food is so important. Food is your fuel. You convert that food into you. Rebuilding you. Why do you think people died? They damaged themselves systematically and they were starving. The last 3 years I caught up releasing the old, taking on so much of the new. That's why people plateau. And when the frequencies change, they have to keep rising to the level of the frequency change. If the frequencies are changing all the time, they have to keep rising to the level of it. Which is why larger men who don't treat their disease could potentially get ahead if they keep feeding it. You never starve disease. You feed it and you release the old. Humanity has had it backwards for many centuries. They kept starving disease. They kept using antibiotics, taking away their future. And they kept drugging their disease. Because your children do take away your future unless you learn how to feed yourself and teach your kids how to feed themselves. Which means they have to learn from their own mistakes. But what happens is parents take away their future by putting all their energy in their children and their grandchildren, and everybody cannibalizes the parents. Everybody dies because the parents let them. And they keep drugging their disease. Reinventing the wheel with offspring in their body and even in their family. And so the food they are eating doesn't go to them as far as the parent. It keeps feeding the children who die later anyways as an adult, basically an adult child. And that's why when you see mature children in Hollywood, children can be matured very early, but they also can die very early. When you keep feeding children, the parent dies, and the children die later as a parent. It's time for humanity to mature. The old world, you had slower frequencies and so many families. Major human experimentation. The new world, higher frequencies, less families, more intellectual maturity. Theoretically, you should never treat disease, but every individual person must decide what they can handle. Okay, so the old world, they had you all develop your nuclear families in those planned cities of suburbia hell, right? Everyone had the same car. and the same kind of house, and the dad went out and did his job, and the mother stayed home and had her kids barefoot and pregnant, and then you had alcoholism, and then you had drug addiction, and then you had domestic violence, and then you had all these different things, and then they did all the human experimentation through the hospital system with all the different V's and all the different surgeries and gene editing, and they kept, and of course the different lifestyles, right? And they kept experimenting on your family. All right? And so, yeah, the old world, you had slower frequencies and so many families and so much innovation because some people were able to get to the higher energy conversion, the antigen antibody programming, the type A and type B, blood type A and blood type B, so they can be more focused on certain subject matters and produce inventions, innovation, specific intentions. And some people are programmed and they were exploited, and then they get their memories back. You've seen that in the conspiracy world, if you follow that world. And so people have come out and remembered stuff, okay? And some was pretty aggressive. I would say I got lucky with the programming I received because I didn't turn into someone like a Charles Manson. I got all the gifts that he had as far as the intellectual capability and a little bit of the charisma. Not so much, but yes, a little bit. But I didn't get all of the negative characteristics where he was feeding off. Well, he thought himself as Jesus Christ, and that's not my world. And so he thought he was the second coming to the world. And then he fed off those girls sexually. And he fed off society so much that he even destroyed some people in his world and in Hollywood. And even though, yeah, he was dumpster diving and living minimally, his negative attributes outweighed what could have been positive because of certain programming that he received. And it was the violence. And I'm sure the imagery is what messed him up. And so a lot of you guys have been exposed to violence, not only on TV, but in your home. And now some people have been programmed so heavily that for them to release that type of violent predisposed issues, they have to go through hell to release those demons, literally. And do they have the infrastructure, the support system? Most don't. So they have to be controlled by the system and maybe be under drug control in order to keep those proclivities at bay. And that's why you don't mess with anyone out there, especially in this environment, because people are hair trigger and their demons are coming to surface. And so that's why I stay far away from most people out there in the public, because you don't know what people were raised with, what they've seen, what they've done, and what they could do. You keep a low profile out there. But I keep a higher profile on Facebook, so you guys have a choice. But when I'm out there face to face with people, I don't fuck with anybody. I don't play the enforcer game. I don't play any games out there. I go and do my thing and get the hell out. So theoretically, you should never treat disease, but every individual person must decide what they can handle. Treating disease just takes you closer to death, more so in this environment. But again, not everybody can pull themselves out of the grave. Some people have a chance, others don't. Middle-aged and younger people, your parents should be a lesson of what not to do, especially if they plan to die someday, and justify it. If that's where you want to end up, go down with the ship with them. Godspeed. Go for it. But if you want to do something different in your family genetically, maybe it's time to challenge your parents. If you want to survive in this new frequency change, you can still respect them, but you don't have to end up like them. You deserve a chance. And given I am Generation X, and someone said a while ago, why does that even matter, you're Generation X? Because we were the experimental generation. We'll either end up following the mainstreamers and go over the cliff with everybody else, or we find a way to counter it literally. Not like, oh, well, I'm going to be a holistic person versus an allopathic. No, I already went down that road. I had to go further than playing that I'm going to be a Gaia holistic earth mother versus a pharmaceutical lab coat wielding person. No, I wasn't going to play that game. I had to go further than being some earth mother. Okay, not that I was a mother anyway. All right, but I am Generation X, and it was a crapshoot where I was going to end up. I can see the past and the future. I have the silent generation as parents and the greatest generation as grandparents. I met my grandmother, and we hung out with her for a minute. She came over to the house when we were kids. I got to know my grandmother, both of them, on my dad's side and my mom's side. I went to Florida, St. Petersburg, to the retirement home, and we stayed with them for like a week when my parents went on vacation. It was actually my grandfather died on my dad's side, but my grandmother on my dad's side, she was still around, and she had a boyfriend at the time, and it was cool. They took care of us, and she was really awesome. I mean, I guess as awesome as you can be at 10 years old or 7 years old with a grandmother who's way older. But I got to know my other grandmother, and she definitely was a character. And she was raised in the 1920s and 30s and whatever, had so much history behind her. And I came from the Vietnam War, so I have a lot of history behind me. And in the silent generation, people, they were babies during World War II at the end of it. Okay, and then they were raised in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the most integral time of the cultural revolution of America when you think about it. Okay? And so Gen X can see the past if they've had access to the past. And they're also developing the present and the future. And when you have your hands in the past and have been exposed to the past personally, and also reading about it to put everything in perspective, and you're also developing the present, staying in the present, and also developing the future. Holy shit, you have now, who do you really want to listen to, a dinosaur or someone in the future? Or do you want to listen to somebody who has a hand in the past, who has a hand in the present, who has a hand in the future? And when you can see the past, present, and future, then you're like, oh shit, how do I not end up like my freaking parents who are dying or dead from cancer, disease, and chronic illness, right? So given I am Generation X, I can see the past and the future. I have silent generation and greatest generation relatives, so I can see that far in the past. And I'm also looking way ahead in the future. I can future think. I can plan for the future. If you want to listen to anyone, listen to people who have a hand in the past and in the future, who's also very present. Or you can listen to people who are in the past, like dinosaurs and ghosts, end up like them. Or only listen to people in the future telling you you are a ghost because you're working for the future, but you'll never be able to see it. I've seen those posts where someone says, oh yeah, 150 years from now, no one here will ever be around. I'll be dead. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's a fucking curse, spell, whatever. It ain't a gift. Someone telling you that you're going to die. I don't want anyone telling people that they're going to die. People have to choose that for themselves, but I'm not casting any spells on anyone. And you know, parents and people cast spells on their friends and family. You're going to die someday. You're going to die someday. Life is short. Play hard. You're going to die someday. Oh, I hear that, and it pisses me off, but I know that they're projecting their own limitations because they were only meant to be temporary. I'll tell you, back in 6,000 years ago, when the Anunnaki or whoever developed a human race and they wanted slaves for the system, you're seeing them today. You're seeing your ancestors who were slaves for the Anunnaki way back when, if that's the story you want to adopt. You're seeing them today. They are temporary people here who will tell you you will die someday. And they can't evolve. They won't. They refuse to. They are stuck in whatever programming that was forced on them as a child. And they will stay that way. No matter how much evidence you show them. That it doesn't have to be that way. They will still think that way. And even though they might sort of a little bit evolve, tiny bit, the real evolution is painful. And do they have what it takes? They may or may not. I don't know. So I've seen those posts where people cast spells on their friends and family. And also on their Facebook. And so, or you can be balanced both the past, present, and future. And you don't have to die someday. And so many of you are at a fork in the road. And you're seeing where you could potentially end up. You can end up like your parents, or you can end up like me, having to go through the 7 years of hell, or even more so, change your lifestyle, change your belief system, survive this, stop resisting what's going on, find a way to assimilate. And is whatever you're doing worth it? If it is, enjoy whatever you're doing, or you can end up dead at some point. It'll be out of your hands. You have a choice now. You have a choice now. Never hold regrets for whatever choices you make. But don't you dare blame anybody. Don't you dare blame anyone, because you signed on the dotted line. You chose to take those supplements. You chose to take those antibiotics, those surgeries. You chose. You fucking chose. You chose to starve yourself. You chose not to change your lifestyle. You chose to think you can protect yourself from the environment. How the hell are you going to protect yourself from 300 freaking cell towers and 900 and something antennas and your own need for communication called a telephone, called mass media, called keeping up with all your friends in the conspiracy world or in the activism world or with your friends or your family? You have to adapt to whatever radiation that's being released, and it's all safe because it's FCC approved. What's FCC? Federal Communication something, where the radiation that's emitting from your phones and devices is safe enough for the general population. And if you have an issue with the FCC approved phone or an FDA approved food, maybe you are deficient and you have your own fucking issues. See, now you're getting it. Now you see what the system has done. They allowed you to think that everything is poison, that you have to get protection from everything. And they allowed you to think that you don't have the ability to adapt. And they gave you everything you could possibly want. All the treatments, all the surgeries, all the oncology, all the diets, all the cures, and the concoctions until you backed your ass in a corner until when the environment does change, you don't really have the ability to adapt to it because it'd be too fucking painful. But you allowed it to happen. But did you know any better? Well, 7 years ago, I developed something that was amazing and it evolved. And if you would have followed me for the last 7 fucking years and followed my information and stayed with my evolution, you could be in a very different fucking place. And probably not forking out so much money in diets and protective gear and anger and resistance. You could be in a very different place. But some of you chose to say, hey, wait, fuck it, who cares? Whatever. And so, yeah, Disney told us a lot of things. Disney's not satanic. They're just telling you their side of it. There's the happy, happy, joy, right? Like, riding off into the sunset with Prince Charming, happily ever after, which, okay, potentially could happen. If you go through the pain of the stepsisters, of Maleficent, of Ursula, if you paid your dues, you could have a happy ending. I mean, not like massage therapy happy ending, but you could have a relatively okay ending that doesn't have to end. And so when I was taking naps yesterday, narcoleptically falling asleep in the afternoon for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time, because it was pretty aggressive yesterday. And I kept feeding the energy, taking a nap, feeding the energy. Sleeping Beauty she slept away the old world, and all those rose briars enveloped her whole town and castle. Everyone was asleep until Prince Charming fought his way through all the briars, kissed her true love's kiss. She woke up in the new world, which is her Prince Charming. Now, you're not going to really see that out there right now, literally, because there's a lot of men out there who are suffering. A lot of women that are suffering. Happily ever after is not really, realistic at this point, because we have too many people with damaged immune systems that when those demons come to surface, who's to say who will be in the target, in the crosshairs? And so that's why you be careful with strangers. You be careful with people that you don't know very well. And even the people that you know well, and you know what kind of their background is, you never know what comes to surface. But then again, when people start feeling stuff, and they start feeling sick and having weird thoughts, they have to go see somebody to get those hormones under control, to get their memories under control so they don't act out some of the more aggressive memories if they had that in their background. And so, yeah, I was thinking about also the system. They're not going to poison you per se. So everything that's FDA approved, whether it's a therapy or food, is not poison. If you have a reaction to a therapy or food, you have the deficit. Okay, so anything as far as frequencies from a phone or a TV or any kind of device, it's all FCC approved. Especially if it's sold in the US, it's FCC approved. And so I said, I think the frequency already went out because I felt stuff ever since 9/11. Even more so last week, even more so on Friday. And Friday, people were getting into accidents. People were not thinking clearly. Their head was scrambled. And then Saturday and Sunday and Monday and even yesterday and sometime even today. And then we're going to have that trigger this afternoon, which is that long beat plus a half-hour message. So that on top of the last couple weeks, you can only imagine what may happen from that. And so psychosomatic. Now, of course, I was raised by a psychotherapist, and I went to college a few classes in psychology, nothing crazy. I don't have a degree in anything, but I have a lot of experience in a lot of things, okay? But psychosomatic, along with actual low inaudible frequencies, can make people's situations worse if they are already compromised. And then an actual frequency, such as a loud beep, could actually cause people to go off the deep end because they built up expectation in their suspense. It's not to say that the frequencies aren't doing what they're doing. Of course they are, because they are. But those who already have issues, especially around the therapies, will make their situation worse. That's why you don't just say it's going to do, that's why, then why don't you just say it's going to do something? Even though it's psychologically induced, it's still doing something. Potentially everything is FCC approved. So if it's FCC approved, it's not dangerous or poison. So even when someone psychologically thinks something's going to happen, something happens, that's still doing something. Remember, you now bear 100% of the responsibility in how you react to things in your belief system. And if you follow people who are so afraid of everything, who don't know how to strategize their way out of a paper bag, then that was your fucking choice. And people say, oh, when I mentioned about the hives, and someone said somebody got hives too, and then they mentioned the flu Vs a couple years ago. They said, oh, they got them back 10 years ago. The person has hives now. So they're blaming the flu Vs all the way 10 years ago. How do you know it was the flu V that did it? It could have been that herbal remedy that came to surface and turned into a hive. You have absolutely no idea where these hives originated from. Did you do a biopsy on the hive and study its components to figure out the history of where this hive came from, where it was originated from? No, you didn't. You're making an assumption because you have an already built-in belief system to blame the fucking Vs. But don't blame that any of the therapies the person has taken in the holistic world, all the supplements and the detoxes and the antibiotics they've ever taken ever since 10 years ago. So no, I don't play the game of blaming the Vs, because there's so many other factors besides the Vs that contribute to people's conditions. And so, yeah, anything that's FDA approved or FCC approved, it's not fucking poison. You're just deficient and you are tunneled and biased. And some people are dying out there. Some people are dying out there and they can't see anything other than their biased point of view. And so I give them that latitude because they've been sick, they have been treated, they've been in hospitals, and they are entrenched. And you can't talk them out of it. But I'm not going to attack them because I know where they're coming from. They can't evolve. They won't. And I kind of feel bad for their kids because their kids are going to go over the ship with them at some point. The kids will blame the Vs, blame everything else but themselves, not take any personal responsibility, and they'll end up just like mommy, over the fucking cliff, blaming everyone as she leaves this earth. And so, potentially, everything is FCC approved. So if it's FCC approved, it's not dangerous or poison. But it's people's psychological makeup is what's going to do them in. And so what is psychosomatic? of a physical illness or other condition caused or aggravated by a mental factor such as internal conflict or stress. Her doctor was convinced that most of Edith's problems were psychosomatic, all in the mind. Absolutely. Psychological, irrational, stress-related, stress-induced, subjective, subconscious, unconscious, relating to the interactions of mind and body. And so my husband feels stuff, so do I, but we feed the information or inflammation. Our bodies release. We don't treat disease in this household. Now he has, but he did it this time. It wasn't necessary. I even tried to feed him the chicken soup, and though I ate it, he didn't really have it. He didn't feel like he needed it. He didn't feel that bad where he actually had to listen to me. But I did make him one night cabbage and potatoes and chicken breast. He's like, we're having cabbage? Yeah, I hope you shit. That's what my intention was, to make him shit out whatever was stressing him out, the disease. But we don't treat disease. We release it with the food, but not taking food as medicine. I had cabbage as part of his meal. I cut up that with some onions and potatoes and chicken breast with salt and pepper, not even vinegar. And it was really good. I liked it. And animals feel what's going on. Your animal is reacting, has been reacting for the last month. People have been dropping like flies. I think the frequency already was released, but it was FCC approved, therefore not dangerous, except to those who already have issues. And the rate of death and disease is still acceptable in the general population. Okay? And so with the higher frequency, the system has a formula for the rate of death based upon the public exposure, such as cell towers and phones and therapies. Okay? And so the FCC logo or the FCC Mark is a voluntary mark employed on electronic products manufactured or sold in the United States, which indicates that the electromagnetic radiation from the device is below the limits specified by the Federal Communication Commission, and the manufacturer has followed the requirements of the Supplier's Declaration of Conformity authorization procedures. The FCC label is found even on products sold outside the U.S. territory, because they are either product manufactured in the U.S. and has been exported, or they are also sold in the U.S. This makes the FCC label recognizable worldwide, even to people to whom the name of the agency is not familiar. So most people out there have an FCC-approved phone, okay? And so on top of what people are already feel from the frequencies, then you add in the psychosomatic stress disorders, now you have major disease. Psychosomatic disorder resulting from stress may include hypertension, respiratory ailments, gastrointestinal disturbances, migraine and tension headaches, pelvic pain, impotence, rigidity, dermatitis, and ulcers. And so then I posted something about scientists that says babies will grow in artificial wombs within 10 years. And I said, I don't disagree. Less trauma. The only memories it will have is wherever the genes came from. And then that baby can be programmed to be a well-functioning member of society and doesn't have to deal with the mother's issues and her boyfriends or girlfriends or partying or smoking or drugs or alcohol or any of those things that right now these kids are subjected to because a mother has a specific lifestyle and belief system. And the kid gets programmed by the mother. If she's like a religious person or a very highly political person or a very scientifically dogmatic person, that kid is held to that specific standard and then has to suffer through that kind of programming. And you see how kids turn out sometimes. Well, you see them out there in the population. Some are very intolerant because of that programming. And so I don't disagree with that programming. Okay? We have every single gene out there, all the way from someone that's type A, type B, who knows math and English and science and chemistry and physics. And we have people who are so strong, firemen and policemen and construction workers and bricklayers and all that. So we don't have to sacrifice a mother anymore and tie her down. Mothers have been used as a tool to be like a farm animal, farming out children, and then she programs her children in a specific way, and then these children sometimes turn into serial killers. They turn into bullies. They turn into people who are intolerant. Okay? Now you see why the system does what it does. I get it now. So then finally, I was able to get an example with someone who has a dog that had minimal veterinary intervention. The dog is well taken care of by all the members of the family. They have room to run around in. The family is mobile, but they understand my information. And I think that the dog had one immunization when it was a puppy, because that's what the owners did prior to that. So they got the dog as a puppy and had one immunization. They didn't go to the vet at all since then. And so there's someone in the J world who has an animal who has had seizures, but not for over a year. So remember, it's been about a year since I've had my animal die. In November, it'll be February when my animal passed away. But November was when things took a turn for the worse. And so there's someone in the J world who has an animal who has had seizures, but not for over a year. As far as I know, they haven't had anything damaged in them from the veterinary system, and they confirmed it. One immunization. The animal is still alive. They get people food, appropriate for animals. They have a place to play, a nice family, well taken care of. And the animal had my juice in small amounts, like the pulp, in its food. Probably not so much anymore, as far as they don't give it my juice anymore, because they don't need it. It doesn't need it. It doesn't need my juice anymore. And it went through seizures way back, just like my animal. That animal's still alive and is doing quite well. And I posted a picture on there. I was hoping that for my animal. Remember, I didn't know the history of my animal too much. She was 4 years old when I got her. So she had 4 years of trauma and programming from a prior fucking family. I was hoping that for my animal. If it wasn't for my dog's prior surgeries, she might have stood a chance. But if her surgery is what gave her her life because she had tumors that they couldn't let go, at this point, it doesn't even matter. I was screwed either way. I was just a person to pick up where someone else left off and clean up their mess. And that's a shitty way of unloading life on people. A really shitty way. That's why saving animals is a double-edged sword. And the system makes money off the suffering. Backyard breeders make a ton of money. And who loses in the end? The animal. Because the owners will just keep changing the animal out, collecting souls. I live in a town where people backyard breed dogs. And of course, these dogs are not well taken care of. And they end up in the shelter, traumatized. That's why I say if you want a second chance at life and you're not that far gone and you're minimally treated, stay away from the medical holistic system. And if you don't have to get the surgery, don't get it. And if you're forced to get that surgery to live a certain kind of lifestyle, I'm so sorry. You might get a chance if you stay away from them, but your life must be different. Now you know why I am the way I am. I have a second chance at life. Many people who have been treated so extensively by the system does not. And it makes me so sad. And it makes me mad because I see the suffering out there. And it's hard not to see the suffering out there because there's so much of it. And so the owner added a comment. He was just about to take her for a walk. She's almost 13 now. The seizures were seasonal for around 6 years. And yes, that is correct. No seizure for well over 12 months. And she didn't have the pulp from the juice in her food, not for a very long time at the very beginning of the journey. And all those years, we never, ever took her to the vet. It's fucking awesome. We had her from a puppy. She did have her first immunization, 1 out of 3, but we couldn't stop that, as it was the person we got her from that did that. And I said, every animal deserves a life like that animal. Every fucking animal. And so that's why I'm against the veterinary system. That's why I'm against the butchery of the surgery system. Because when people finally wake up, that they don't have to be in the programming that their parents put them in, that their teachers have put them in, that the system has pigeonholed them in, when they finally get the freedom to fucking choose for themselves, they have a second chance. But when you have so much surgery, so many remedies done to you, when you have so much trauma to you from so many different things, whether it's politics, religion, or science, that's very difficult to release and come back from and to reprogram yourself to your expectations that is still a contributing member of society. Okay? At least psychologically, you could potentially reprogram yourself, but when somebody alters you physically, through surgery, through trauma, even massive amounts of drugs, that's very painful to not only release that damage, but also to build yourself back up again. And so, if I can impress upon people, is if you want a second chance at life, and even though your parents programmed you in whatever politics, religion, or science, and it could be major religions and major politics, major science, dogmas, so intolerant, you can still have a chance to save yourself. Because you know as well as I that those dogmatic politics, religion, and science religions all have remedies and diets and ways to eat, staying away from food, afraid of symptoms. They all have those embedded in the culture. But the less that you do damage to yourself physically, the better chance you have. And some parents have set their kids up astronomically, horrifically, not very good at all. Some parents have already applied so many surgeries on that child for whatever reason. And they have given their children so many different antibiotics. And they have brainwashed their child into some very dogmatic religions. These kids, some of these kids don't stand a chance. They will have to live out their life with the programming their parents gave them. And you hope they survive. And you hope they're not going to be psycho killers in the future once triggered. You hope. And so that's why the system wants to have those artificial wombs to lessen that kind of trauma on that poor child. To give that child half a fucking chance. Because some of these parents don't have a chance for themselves, and they're not going to give a chance to their fucking kid. Because they have too much pride. They want little mini-me's around them. Their pride and joy as their kid suffers through their religion, through their politics, and their science. But I had minimal damage to me as far as drugs. Let me tell you, some of these kids were forced drugs like ADHD medication, Ritalin, when they were children. Ritalin. Forced every single day to take a drug. Every day. And they're paying for it now in their 20s. They have a lot to come back from. Some of these kids have been forced operations. Been forced food mitigation. Forced so many things. And you feel bad for them because you know these kids are going to have a hard time coming back from that. And so the system is trying to now develop children who don't have so much trauma to them in the past. And there's ways to develop strong people. And so I was watching Breaking Bad, and I'm watching now El Camino, but I watched Breaking Bad. I forgot even the ending. I was tired last night. So I gotta watch the ending again. I don't even remember the ending. It was just last night that I watched it. But Jesse Pinkman, he's one of the main characters. He went through hell with his abusers who were forcing him to cook meth in that storyline. And they did a number on him. I mean, he was already, messed up anyways, but he was even more messed up. Being, not only psychologically, but also physically abused by the people. But he also messed himself up with all the meth. But you can develop strong people who don't have to die someday through very specific programming. Okay? And so the system is going to deploy certain programming based upon the intention and the need. And you have to work from a whiteboard. If you already have the programming of perseverance like I did, born from the Vietnam War, already starving with trauma because of wartime situations, that already kind of gave them a head start, and then training me even more to be who I am today. But, when you already have a kid who's seen domestic violence, seen all the different, horror movies of girls being brutalized, boys being brutalized, and slasher movies. And then on top of that, have already deficiencies and narrow viewpoints of different genders. And then you have religion on top of that. Can you only imagine what that adult's going to be like? And so the system is now trying to develop a blank slate so they can program these people properly. Because as you know, a lot of these kids out there are not being programmed really to be a contributing member of society. They're being programmed to be a cult leader, whether it's in politics or religion or some science dogma. And that's very scary because we already see what happened in the 1960s, all those different cult leaders in religious, like David Koresh, Jim Jones. And you add religion on top of that, and some of these people who are so legalistic. I've been around different cult leaders. Okay? Legalistic. Been to jail for certain things. I wasn't around when they went to jail, but I knew them before they were caught. Didn't know what they were doing because everything was behind closed doors. Okay? So you can imagine what some of these parents are developing in their children. That's why the system is trying to guide reproduction very carefully, because look what parents who don't have anybody curbing their behaviors are developing in their offspring. Some pretty dangerous people. And so the whole J world is about, if you have the capacity and you're not so damaged by the medical and the holistic system, you have a fucking second chance at life. If you feed the information, change your lifestyle, potentially even change your belief system, and you understand what it means to face the goddamn pain. And the pain is brutal. It can be, relative to how much damage you've already sustained. And so what's going on right now is very serious. And it's so necessary. So fucking necessary. I hope you take it seriously. All right, bye. Give your kids a chance.